She does look just like that dog.
In the face.
In the face. Now, obviously,
that dog
it's
is much bigger.
Well, yeah, it's much bigger, and it's also heavily CGI'd. But Bailey looks pretty close. It's got the same coloring, the same white streak.
Looks a little bit like Buck.
So we could argue Puppy Dog is a disciple, because this is a true story, right?
Call Wild.
I was about to say, Call of the Wild,
based on Jack London's
book.
Yeah.
I had never read the book, so I couldn't.
It's been since middle school.
Well,
and there were certain things that would happen, and I'd be like, oh yeah. But there were also parts where I'm like, I don't know how closely this is following.
See, that's what was funny is you would lean to me like, I think this happened instead.
Yeah.
But that being said, this was kind of the feeling I got from this movie, even though it's a stupid comparison, but it's the feeling I would have wanted after Sonic. This is a movie that I thought was a good family type film that actually was really enjoyable for me.
You didn't enjoy Sonic?
Not like this. Like this was something it actually.
These are two completely different. To me, it was along the same lines. To me, this was in the same lines as like Marley and Me. And
no, yeah, I would say that. But it also
had sweeter. But there's also a lot more. I mean, it's a coming of age story for a dog, and it's listening to your animal instincts.
That's pretty. Which is honestly something that I thought was pretty cool. Which was it's a.
I mean, the book. From what I remember about the book, it's a cool story.
Like, I mean, you're following a puppet dog. We discussed it after we got out of the theater. The best part of the whole movie for me was when he was the sled dog. That was the part that
was the most enjoyable part of the movie. Yes.
Yeah.
Because it was him. This was the point of he had grown up in not really high society, but he was from California. He was a house dog.
Yeah, that's house society.
Yeah,
high society. He was doing whatever he wanted.
Yeah, and it was high society for a dog.
Yeah,
yeah, and he was living the dream for a house pet, and then basically he ran the town. Like they made the joke because he was the.
They were like
he was the governor.
They called him a scoundrel or something. They were like, "Don't hit that dog. That's the judge's dog."
Yes, the judge's dog.
So it's like. Yeah, it's like, he was just doing whatever he damn well wanted to. But then, it was him growing up.
Yeah.
As when he was a part with Omar Sy. And that had...
And he was good.
I thought Omar Sy was pretty good.
Him and the girl, that his partner...
Yeah. No, I thought...
I could have watched the whole movie on
That's kind of what I was saying.
Them delivering the mail. And...
I wanted more of that, because the other thing was the only threat, the only villain, except for, I guess... what was the lead dog was kind of a nuisance, but the only threat was like the elements of the wild. Mm-hmm. Whereas
as the story
goes on, it's more of like people being mean, and with Omar Sy's character really loved his dogs, and he in particular he really liked Buck.
Yeah,
especially because Buck saved his girlfriend, and. But that was the most enjoyable story because it was just like a very sweet part of that story. Another enjoyable...
The rest of the movie, though, I mean, is still pretty solid.
It's pretty solid. What was Karen Gillan doing in this movie?
I think, I mean, to me, it was one of those things that she knew somebody or somebody...
She had to have heard, you're going to be on screen with Harrison Ford, but only for one scene, and she was like, fine.
Yeah.
Because that's literally what it felt... I mean, she was on screen a grand total of maybe 45 seconds. And Dan Stevens was in it less than 5 minutes, but even though he was the villain, which that made more sense. I was like, oh, he's, besides Harrison Ford, he's like one of the main characters in this movie.
Yeah. And then the judge was
Bradley Whitford. Who I really like. All the actors in the movie did fine, but the movie is about the dog.
Yeah,
you know.
And again, this book is written
from the dog
the dog's perspective. You're hearing the inner monologue of the dog.
And where in this one, the narration is Harrison Ford.
Yeah,
and it's not the inner monologue of the dog. It's just he's kind
telling Buck's story.
Yeah. Let's get to how did you feel about the CGI dogs?
I didn't think it was bad.
Really? I did. Okay, continue. Because I was about to say
I didn't think it was bad, but to be able to get the reactions and facial expressions they needed out of a dog, there was no other way to do it.
You could do it like Babe, maybe. You could combine the two, right? I
Yeah.
mean, you could have gotten like a real animal and then maybe gotten and used some CGI. There were just, that being said, like
that might have been a much more difficult production.
That's true. And I'm sure they were just trying to turn something out real quick to make some money. Because this was a movie.
I felt like it was, this movie is more than that. I mean, again, this story in itself is more than that.
Or just churning something out.
Yeah.
Hey, she's protecting. Something's making noises.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I thought it was. I mean, it's a story that's been told before. I mean, didn't they? You know, I mean, it's. It wasn't. It clearly not a whole. It didn't seem like a whole lot of production.
I mean,
was put into
it's
it.
essentially Into the Wild, except with a dog.
No, I know.
Like,
technically, Into the Wild was Call of the Wild.
Essentially,
basically, because Call of the
except
Wild.
That one was the dog is being called home, and that guy was just
out there.
Yeah.
The guy was a jerk. Anyway, that's besides the point.
That's a great movie, though.
Oh, it's a decent book, but in this movie, the CGI, there are moments where I was like, ugh. Like I
really, I never had moments.
But it was also something that I was able to get over because the dog, even though he looked ridiculous, he was so cute at times, and and I like kind of bought into it, much like you said, where they looked at it as that was probably the easiest way to display emotion from these animals, you know,
because dogs can display emotion,
yeah,
but they can't act.
We don't know that. Bailey, we could have gotten Bailey to audition.
I mean,
I don't know.
Because I mean, there's definitely times I talk to her and like there's emotion,
but it's also it's not like, okay, give me sadness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though at times in this movie with Buck, they would say things to him like, okay, you're gonna go do this, and you're gonna go. It was very much like the old episodes of I guess Lassie, where they're like, okay, the so-and-so stuck in the old mine, I need you to go and get help, blah, blah, and do all this, do all that, and then Lassie's like, okay. And that's how Buck was sometimes. Like, he would tell him something, and then he would do a lot of what he wanted him to, you know, what he told him. But that being said, this movie still was something that the whole time I just kind of was smiling throughout. Like, it was the family movie that it's been my favorite family movie so far this year. Plus, I also love the setting of this movie. I love the Yukon, and it's. I don't care if some of it was CGI'd or what. It still looked. It gave me that feeling of like, man, that just looks like it would be fun to live out there.
Yeah. And
so that combined with cute puppy dogs, it was just something that I really kind of walked away enjoying. You know. Like, if it's on TV, I'd probably tune to it and just watch it.
It's an enjoyable, it's solid.
It's an enjoyable, solid movie, exactly. It's nothing to blow you away, but it's like, if you have a family, go see this movie. And even if you don't have a family, go see this movie.
Yeah, and I mean, there's definitely, if you've ever had any kind of emotional connection to a dog, there's those moments too.
Oh, yeah. So, what would you give this movie?
Probably a B. Just a solid B.
Yeah, I would give it the same. Because, like I said, the CGI for me at times was a bit distracting. And there were just cheesier parts to it.
To me, it wasn't the CGI being distractingly bad. To me, it was the CGI. There were times where almost cartoonish things would happen that the dog would do, and I was like, it would be for like a second or two, and you would get the feeling like, oh, I'm watching like Scooby-Doo.
Yes.
And that was a little strange.
Yeah. I also
and it specifically at the beginning where he hops from bed to bed and everything, and you're like, it doesn't look real. And it almost gives you the wrong, because that's the beginning of the movie, it almost gives you the wrong vibe.
I was about to say, because from the get-go, when that happened, I was like, oh, it's going to be this type of movie. And I was not looking forward to that.
But it's weird because, again, it does. It only happens for, like, certain small things.
And then it moves on from that, and then it's, I guess you could say, somewhat realistic, you know? Like, and and then it's like, oh, this is why I actually kind of like this movie. But you're right. There are small moments where you're like, oh, that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
You know? And
there were just some other things, too, like, I understood the buck not wanting him to drink. I got that. But then, like, the one guy was like, what are your intentions here? And it was like, he had a gun. But in the Old West, like, a lot of people had
No, but, I mean,
guns.
I mean, obviously I didn't live in the Old West, but, like, for instance, you know, like in Unforgiven, the town Gene Hackman is sheriff in, no one can have a gun in town, in the middle of town. So there may have been like similar rules for other towns in the Old West.
I mean, yeah, but you see how that town turned out.
What do you mean how it turned out? A guy walked in with a gun, they beat him out of a bar. No. Oh, you're talking about the Gene Hackman bar. Well, that was
talking about Unforgiven.
That was different because, well,
and then Moody got mad and started drinking again. And he finished that.
Listen, I love Unforgiven. God, yeah, I do. But that part didn't bother me really at all.
No, I'm just saying there were certain things where I was like, that was kind of odd. Like the fact that they didn't go into that. But because it was like, you know, they saw the altercation. Everybody saw what happened.
Dan Stevens walks in, sucker punched Harrison Ford.
Yeah.
The dog got mad at Dan Stevens. It was like, it should have been an open and shut case.
That whole town was there when Dan Stevens and Harrison Ford, because they had an altercation in the middle of the street.
Well, Harrison Ford was like, Dan Stevens' character was clearly in over his head. He didn't know what the fuck he was doing. As far as like, going.
And what role was he?
I was about to ask the same question. That was not
because
clear.
It was because what's her
Karen Gillan
and her husband.
Well, at first I thought Stevens was the husband.
I did too.
But then I was like, oh, I guess he's a scout, like a guide. But he didn't know what he was doing. So it was like, is this just like a random guy?
Or maybe they were and then from there I assumed, okay, they were the money behind his expedition to go find gold.
Yeah, which I think was the case. He was clearly gold hungry.
Yeah.
Like, because then that's how the rest of the movie is that he's just obsessed with the idea that Harrison Ford was trying to stop him from going to a certain area because that's where tons of gold was.
And see, I think in the book it probably plays better because it's being told from the dog's point of view, and the dog wouldn't know those circumstances.
Right.
But if Harrison Ford's telling the story, you should probably have a little insight of what's going on there.
I would agree.
But again, though, it's little stuff like that are the weak points to this movie.
That's where it's like a little cheesy. Like that's where it does feel like a family-friendly film to me. Is that it's like it's not trying.
When you say family-friendly film, like it's a lesser film. Like I don't know. I don't
I think
agree
they're trying to simplify certain things so that even someone that's like 5 years old can easily just understand what's going on. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like, I don't think they're not going to make it difficult for a certain age range for them to understand. I think it's
good guy, bad guy.
It's very simple.
Yeah.
And the movie is simple, but for me it worked.
Oh,
and that's where, like you said, you gave it a B. I would give it a B as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, I'm trying to. I don't think there was much else really. It's a simple movie. There's not much really to dive into.
And it is too. I don't want to say it's a shame, but I do remember. Again, I don't remember the book very well, but that was one of the things I liked about the book was that it's a grittier book, and it is about the dog like being torn between being a dog and then feeling the animal instinct, and he's fighting with that.
It's not that aspect they don't really tackle about him fighting, but they do. That is the main point of the story.
He's constantly like in this. They use the dog as the wolf.
The wolf
is
with the yellow eyes,
symbolizing the because in the story, I don't
It's
know.
the call of the wild.
Yeah, he's being like he constantly feels like I've got to go. I've got to go do this. He's being called to the wild, and
that's essentially what happens in this movie.
yeah,
Which is fine, but some of the things you were telling me that you remember about the book is it would have been interesting to hear that.
Yeah.
Or see that. Sorry, because it would be like that's probably what would happen if there was a dog that all of a sudden did go kind of wild.
Yeah.
And really became in tune with his animal.
Yeah, I
instincts.
just remember the book, and not like I mean, again, we were able to read it in middle school.
Yeah.
But there were moments that were a little
more violent,
a little more gritty. Yeah, there. I mean, yeah,
and that's yeah, and
I felt like they toned that down, made some other elements that made it a little more kid friendly, and then that's the movie they made, and it turned out well. It turned out good.
It turned out fine for me.
But yeah.
So, okay, that was our take on Call of the Wild. I would recommend going to see it.
Yeah, especially if you've got a family. It's a PG movie.
Yeah, I think it's PG. Harrison Ford.
I like Harrison. His voice.
He's. I've always thought Harrison Ford's played some iconic characters, but like as an actor, it's like you're fine.
And I think he's good now as an older actor.
I think he was good in this movie. He was solid in
this type of role that he plays in this movie. This type of just an older loner kind of guy.
He's pretty good.
He plays it well. But yeah, definitely recommend it. If you got kids, take them to go see it. If you've got any kind of emotional tie to a dog, you'll definitely like it.
Yeah, when we immediately got back to your place, I was like, "Where's Bailey? Gotta see Bailey dog."
But yeah. All right.
Well, that's our take on Call of the Wild, and you can check us next time.